think that that's like the first time I think I've ever had like a little bit of a almost like an emotional response to a story on the podcast. I'm not a very
It happens to you every day, you know, like whether like I'm fortunate enough to not have the issue, but there's kids in these communities that, you know, they're either abused or neglected, or they have so much going on at home that they don't have the privilege of exploring the natural world. Like what sense does it make for that kid to be like excited about being a biologist if he has to go home and worry about if he's going to eat,
mm,
or worry about if he's going to get beat up on the way home? Like that's the kind of stuff that we understand. You know, like my dad grew up in East Los Angeles in the foster care system, in gangs. He was in prison. Like that dude has been to the ringer. And like speaking to these communities, like we just relate with them. You know, we understand them. And I think what we want to do is frame this not escape route, well, maybe it is an escape route or an escape latch or hatch or whatever to something else through the tortoise. You know, we want to show them that like, look, if you work with this animal and you like you get out and you like want to learn about it and you want to be active in like its conservation and you want to go out there and pick up trash and like help it out, like that's just a way to build a resume. You know, like I went out there and I like built a fence that protected a tortoise. You could put that on a resume. Yeah, we're real firm believers in like you can't tell somebody to love something. You know, you can't be like, you should love this thing for these reasons. I'm trying to do that today with like all the stuff I've been saying. But like at the end of the day, like they have to find it out themselves. They
mm,
can't like, you can't be like, here, love this thing that I just put in front of you. You can be like, check this thing out. And like I can be passionate about it and I can explain it in the way that I try and explain it. And hopefully that's enough to crack that armor a little bit and be like, okay, I can look into this. And then it's just a crack in the window, and it's a crack in the door for them to open the door the rest of the way themselves. And that's when people really hold on to stuff. They hold on to it when they've done it themselves, not because someone told them to do it, because they found it themselves. You know,
yeah.
like that's so important to let people fall in love with something and then like explore it themselves. So that's really what Saving Slowpoke's mission is. It's like get people to fall in love with it so they want to protect it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I think that's exactly right. It needs to come. For people that listen to the show, they know that my job is a swim coach, and so it you cannot force somebody to want to achieve a goal. You can foster them and help them develop their own goals, but until they come to you and say, "This is exactly the success I want to have," that's when you have an athlete that's ready to work with you and pursue these big things. You cannot say, I want you to do this, I want you to do this. It's just never going to happen, and that person's never going to be driven to do that thing. So I think that's exactly the right way to do it. And what an amazing story, though. I imagine if you had told your 20-year-old dad that eventually he'd be in charge of like a tortoise conservancy, that would be the last thing that he would think he was doing.
No, he probably would have tried to stab me.
Yeah, like that's remarkable. What a crazy turnaround, and probably found a lot more passion and value in his life.
Totally, man. And yeah, my dad is really what makes this work the best, because he's like he's so passionate about it. And like when he tells his story to people, like that's what gets them. Like, that's what he puts it into perspective, that like, hey, like I'm not just some dude like coming out here and like telling you like I learned like I was the worst. He was like, he tells people like I wasn't afraid of anything. He's like, I
Mm,
wasn't afraid to die. He was like, if you're not afraid to die, you're not afraid of anything. He's like,
yeah,
I didn't care about anything. He's like, and then I got this job when he the way he tells it, he's like, when I met your mom, I I needed to get a job. He's like, I couldn't be this like cholo from East LA. Like I needed to have like some kind of like money to like, take her out or whatever. And like he started working at Fort Irwin, like I said, we're like setting up targets on like a bombing range. And like he's had a lot of downtime out there. And like he said, one day he was sitting out there and it was hot. He was like, it was like probably September or something, which is really hot still here. And like he said he was laying underneath his truck just to get out of the sun or whatever. And waiting for the rotations to go through. So you need to go set up his targets or whatever after. And he was laying there, and he says like I was laying there and I heard this like crunching like kind of coming up on me. And he said, and I looked, and there's this tortoise that just kind of got under the car with me in the shade and just kind of like kind of like like it settled down and just like kicked it in the shade because it was hot. And he was like, and I laid there with that thing for 3 hours. He's like, I laid it because I didn't know what it was doing. He said, I know if it was gonna bite me or if it was gonna like what the hell it was. He's like, I knew it was like maybe a turtle, but like, he was at that point, he was just this dude like straight out of Los Angeles that like had until that point had never thought about the natural world in that way. And he said that was what changed his life. He's like, he saw that thing, like he's like in sitting there for 3 hours, I thought about how this thing is living out here. Like what's it eating? And like how, and it was just so fascinating to him that like after that he was like, that was it. He's like, I knew that I loved that animal and I knew that it lived here. And I went off of that. And now he's been a park ranger with the Bureau of Land Management for 26 years as a federal employee. So like,
wow.
Yeah, man, he went from the worst of the worst to the best of the best.
That's amazing. I mean, that just, and I think a lot of people listening to this will be able to they can have an experience that is very relatable to that, whether it's, interacting with some form of wildlife or an animal that maybe they keep, because you have there's this innate experience that you can, when you connect with nature, that we all have the capacity to connect with nature, but we're not all given the opportunity to connect with nature. Just whether it's your living situation, like you said, if you're fighting for survival, you don't care about the wild world, especially if you're in an inner city and you don't even get to interact or experience the wild world at all, you're definitely not going to have that connection with nature. But once you do, it's impossible to reverse. And it's very like, it's a comforting and very home type feeling, I think, where and immediately sort of the world unfolds in front of you and you realize how important that is. So what an amazing story. I mean, that is just such an incredible thing. And that is why conserving nature is so crucial, because those experiences are there for everybody. We just have to make sure that their opportunity is still there.
Totally, man.
Dude, that is crazy. I think that's an amazing and a perfect way to wrap up the show. Luke, this was amazing. I think that's like the first time I think I've ever had like a little bit of almost like an emotional response to a story on the podcast. I'm not a very